an enormous red octopus creature that can stretch 10,000 square meters. Tiny little people who live under butterbur leaves. A ghost that holds up a torch at night and plays pranks on people. And more. I just got back from a short trip up north, so I have Hokkaido on the brain. When you think about this northernmost island of Japan, what comes to mind? Sapporo ramen? Spicy soup curry with flash-fried vegetables? Sweet corn on the cob? Or fluffy buttered potatoes? Maybe heaping rice bowls topped high with fresh seafood like crab, uni, ikura, and shrimp. Or rolling hills of fragrant lavender. All those incredible sculptures at the snow festival. What about bears? Or how about the Ainu? I'm Theresa Matsura, and you're listening to Uncanny Japan, a podcast about the delightful and weird and lesser-known nooks and crannies of Japanese culture. We'll be talking about a part of the Ainu culture that you don't hear about very often, and I'm just getting into myself. Let's delve into a handful of their very own yokai, or as the case may be, mythical creatures. I'll cover 7 today. The Ainu are the indigenous people who live there, although there aren't very many anymore. The official estimate is there are only around somewhere between 10,000 to 25,000 people left. As for speakers of the language, it's as few as 15, but maybe 100. It's a sad, terrible story with a lot of forced assimilation and colonization and making people move off their land. Oh, that might sound familiar. It wasn't until May 8th, 1997, that the Japanese government enacted the Ainu Culture Promotion Law, officially acknowledging the existence of the Ainu as an ethnic minority. Just wow. For the first yokai from Hokkaido, we need to go back to ancient times, before the Ainu even got there and named it Ezo. Imagine a race of tiny little people who are speedy and agile, good at fishing, and we're going to learn in a second, kind. They lived in peace in holes in the ground that had giant butterbur leaves covering their roofs. I'm sure allowing them to blend into nature wonderfully. Then, out of nowhere, one day, the Ainu showed up. But don't worry, things don't go bad right away. The Ainu discovered these tiny people, and they named them, and my apologies for my Ainu go, Korpoker or Korpoker. The P and the B sounds aren't distinguished in the language. Korpoker is a combination of kor, which means butterbur plant, pok, which means under or below, and kur, person. The people below the leaves of the butterbur. Butterburs are called fuki in Japanese and have these great big round leaves. Another couple of words for these people were toichi seunkuru or tonchi. Toichi seunkuru or tonchi seems to mean the ones who live in a pit, which sounds kind of rough and wild and mean, but it might have been a brilliant idea considering the climate of Hokkaido. It seems digging about a meter down, then placing pillars with a large sloping roof on top, with plenty of ventilation and some butterbur leaves to make the house fancy, would have kept the families cool in the summer and warm in the winter. So these little people and the Ainu lived in harmony. The Korpoker, though, were shy and they didn't like to show their faces. Despite that, they did exchange goods and help each other. The Korpoker gave these new people fish and deer to eat. They did this at night, where they'd visit an Ainu home and pass the food through windows. Well, one day, a young Ainu man wanted to see what these little people looked like, so he grabbed one and he pulled them inside. This particular kopeker was a woman who was dressed beautifully, and she had a tattoo on the back of her hand. She and her family and the entire race of people were appalled at this lack of respect from the people they had only tried to help. So after that day, they disappeared and were never seen again. The tattoo on the back of the kopeker's hand is said to be the model for the ones that Ainu wives later would put on their own hands. An interesting side note: some anthropologists think they were a real race of people, and the Ainu came in from the north and displaced, possibly eradicated them. Why do they think this? Because archaeologists found some old pottery, tools, and arrowheads that aren't consistent with what the Ainu used. Maybe they were real. Maybe they were little yokai. For number 2, we have the Akkoro-kamuy. Just a heads up, you might hear the word kamui a lot in Ainu mythology. A kamui is a spiritual being, supernatural entity, or deity. It's similar to the Japanese kami, but I read that it's not exactly the same, but I personally haven't figured out what the difference is yet. But you hear it a lot. This beast, called Akkoro-kamuy, is a giant red octopus that lives in Uchiura Bay. So big, in fact, that when it emerges from the water, even the sky is dyed red. For this reason, if there was ever a red sky, people would stay away from the water, knowing what was no doubt there. If you were in a boat, though, and already on the water when the Akkoro-kamuy showed up, you might very well be doomed without so much as a chance. The creature was so big it could swallow ships and whales whole. Still, fishermen were positive thinkers, and they had some grit, so they used to carry weapons like scythes with them, just in case. Not sure if it worked, though. Now, if you think it was only the Akkoro-kamuy lurking in the Uchiura Bay, you'd be wrong. Coming in at number 3, there is the Azui Kakura, or monster sea cucumber. Mostly this fellow hangs out at the bottom of the bay, occasionally latching on to a piece of driftwood with its mouth and floating somewhere else for a while. The problem arises when it gets surprised and starts thrashing around. Then boats are sunk. Or, more adorable, at times it confuses the bottom of a wooden boat for a chunk of driftwood and grabs on. More boats are sunk. The best part of the Azui Kakura, though, is its origin story. It's believed an Ainu woman's undergarment washed down a river and into the bay, and then magically transformed into the giant sea cucumber, which is funny. But I did Google the word moru, which is the item of clothing, and it seems to be more like a big undershirt, not underpants, which would have been even more hilarious. Number 4 is the pentachi-koro-oyashi, meaning a ghost that holds up a torch. It's said to wander around at night, carrying this torch and doing all kinds of strange things to people who are out. One story goes that a chief of a certain village was visiting another village called Kotankeshi. While there, he saw a pentachi-koro-oyashi. The area around it was so bright it was like daylight. Just then, the chief of Kotankeshi village snuck up behind it and stabbed it in the back. The pentachi-koro-oyashi collapsed, but he also passed out. The next day he woke up and he ran back home. After the incident was relayed, some villagers went back to locate the pentachi-koro-oyashi's body. What did they find? A dead raven. An evil raven, evidently, that can transform. Number 5. Since summer is here, let's not forget the apeyaki or abeyaki. These little buddies come from the Horizumi district, and they're basically cicada that were bright red because they were covered in flames. Fire cicada. If one or more landed in a tree, it would immediately burn it to a black, smoking crisp. They were, as you can guess, feared. Sliding in at number 6 is the Iwae Tunai, or, follow me here, Moshire Chiku Chiku, Iwae Chiku Chiku. These are fun too. They're one-eyed flying monsters that live in the mountains. When they're strolling or flying along, if they come across something in their way, they can just zip right through it. Some versions of the story say that they leave big holes in the obstacle. Okay, let's end today with number 7, the Hokkaido-kamuy. While it's a snake or dragon god, my favorite description of this one calls it a giant winged goblin shark. Another name for them is Saksomo Ayep, which roughly translates to the one who must not be mentioned during summer. What a strange name, you say. Well, the reason is the Hokkaido-kamuy grow weak in the winter and strong in the summer. So when they're at their strongest, you don't want to go blathering on about them, lest they hear you. These winged goblin dragon snakes live in lakes, and they reek terribly. How terribly? Well, let me tell you. If a Hokkaido-kamuy comes near plants, they all wither and die. If you are standing downwind from one, your hair will fall out and your skin will swell up. And if you get too close, your skin will start to burn and you just might die. There's a story of a swamp in Hokkaido where one of these dragon gods lived or still lives. It's considered a divine swamp. However, when people pass through the area, they have to climb a hill to avoid accidentally being harmed by the beast. But it's stronger than that because in those instances, it's not even trying. The Hokkaido-kamuy is also purported to have a very powerful venom. The snake dragon deity isn't all bad, though. There is a myth about one that lived in Lake Toya, that when the god of smallpox, called Akkoro-kamuy, came and started killing people left and right, everyone fled to the banks of the river. The Hokkaido-kamuy bravely saved them by driving off the god of pox with its disgusting stench. This particular Hokkaido-kamuy wasn't a winged goblin shark, though. It looked more like a big turtle with wings, which is a nice image, too. I'll stop here. Like I said, I'm just myself starting to learn about the Ainu mythology and folk tales, but I'll keep studying and I'll revisit when I find some more interesting goodies. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the show, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Oh, and patrons, I'm working on some Hokkaido footage that I'll put up for you soon. Bye-bye.